Hello everyone, I am Ranjit Kumar Gautam. I am a teacher of sociology, social research and social political philosophy. Today I am going to teach you about observation. If you are a researcher, you must have curiosity in terms of understanding observation because this is a soul of the human understanding. I am going to start my lecture with a beautiful quotation of Godin Hat, who said, "Science begins with observation and must ultimately return to observation for its final validation." That is to say, all research ultimately depends upon the observation. The history of research is replete with discoveries based on observations. You know, to use observation method is to record behavior as it occurs around us. It consists of cognitive powers of a researcher. It enables researcher to interpret the field. An observer is a mediator between field and data. Observation is an art of scientific investigation. So we must have to clear about our approach of understanding of observation. Observation, as you know, is a primary method of data collection. As a method of inquiry, this method is an alternative to complement to the use of interview, questionnaires, data, and documentary, which requires a great degree of skill. Observation is a very simple method. Observation makes propositions more real in terms of research process. As you know, observation is the most important method of behavioral sciences, but simply seeing the world around us is not observation. Observation becomes scientific tools of investigation only if a researcher has a formulated research questions and research plan. Like, you have to answer the very fundamental question, like, why are you observing particular phenomena? Whatever the purpose of a study, four broad questions confront the observer. The first, what should be observed? How should observations be recorded? What procedures should be used to try to assure the accuracy of observation? And the fourth is, what relationship should exist between the researcher and the research, and how such a relationship is stabilized. Observation involves a research watching and listening to actions and events within some context over a period of time and making a record of what has been witnessed in his or her field study. There is 5 characteristics, I think, that is important. First, full use of human sense. The second, deliberate or minute study. The third is direct study. The fourth is to know about mutual and causal relationship. And the fifth is a study of collective behavior. Observation provides us insightful means to use or to see the pattern of human interaction and behavioral patterns. There are some popular definitions that you should remember. Charles Darwin once said, "How odd it is that everyone should not see all observation must be for or against some worldview if it is to be any service. Scientific theories are built up from a foundation of objective and theory neutral observation. This is the big debate of research methodology is like whether your observation be theory laden or theory neutral. But Charles Darwin and many positivist thinker goes with theory neutral observation. Hawthorn argues the theory, hypothesis, framework, or background knowledge held by an investigator can strongly influence what is observed. Right? So Hawthorn said, like observation has had some influence of your hypothesis and framework. As you know, in qualitative research, uh, you have to develop a hypothesis after going to field, and quantitative research you have to develop hypothesis much before then that, right? So it's about your research methodology, research approach, which determines your the objective of observation. P.B. Young said a very important thing about observation, and I quote: a deliberate study through the eye may be used as one of the most important methods for scrutinizing behavior and complex social institutions, as well as the separate units composing a totality, right? uh, C.A. Moses said, in the strict sense, observation implies the use of the eyes rather than of ears and voice. Oxford Dictionary defined observation: accurate watching, noting the phenomena as they occur in nature with regard to cause and effects or mutual relationship. It may be helpful to provide checklists such as one which follow. A researcher must clear about his categories. First, the participant. You have to detail about your participant that you confront in your field. The setting of your field, the purpose of your study, social behavior of your group in which your study is going, and the frequency and duration. These are all five things you must uh, talk in detail in your research report. uh, Types of observation. The first type is structured observation. When a researcher uses standardized conditions of observation and the selection of pertinent data of observation, the observation is called a structured observation. It is used in descriptive studies. The second type is unstructured observation. When a researcher counts or measures the frequency of particular type of act of social action for the better understanding of phenomena, unstructured, observation techniques is used. It is often used in qualitative research. It is not governed by any pre-stabilized set of categories. It is used in exploratory research. Talking about participant observation, it is important, so I will talk in detail. If the observer experience what the member or respondents of the group experience, the observation is called as the participant observation. Participant observation deals with inside view, familiarity of respondent, because researchers witness, observing phenomena in their natural setting, right, and provides more uh, authentic explanation of phenomena. This method is closely associated with ethnography. This method originated in the fieldwork of social anthropologists and in the urban research of Chicago School. The first time Lindman used the word participant observation in his book Social Discovery in 1924. John Howard study of prison, Malinowski study of agronauts, Raymond Firth study of Tocopia, Irving Goffman study of mental hospital. Now are some important work you must go through if you want to understand how observation is being done in social research. Participant observation does not mean to act or things uh, like respondent. The sociologist cannot, for example, become a criminal in order to study a criminal gang, right? You have to detach yourself at some extent also in participant observation. Participant observation carried out without the explicit awareness and agreement of social unity, which is being studied. It is most extensive and minor study. The participant observation, one may have to sacrifice, scientific decision to some extent. Naturalism, low reactivity, are something which a researcher is supposed to have. A researcher enters the field with a focus or to know something unknown. Participant observation is highly labor intensive method of scientific discovery and mapping, of multiple perspectives with an the inquiring mind. In social interaction, necessarily requires a deep knowledge of participant culture with a long period of observation. If a sociologist wish to learn about the marriage system uh, and to explore social relations among the families of in a suburban community, participant observation is the best method, right? Following are some of the merits of participant observation. The observer is enabled to record the natural behavior of the group. The researcher can even gather information which could not easily be obtained if he observes in a disinterested fashion. Uh, the third is the observer can even verify the truth of a statement made by respondent in the context of a questionnaire or a schedule. The central methodological problem of such research is balancing adequate subjectivity with adequate objectivity. Too much detachment weakens the insights and that participant observation bring in. Other words, the researcher may lose objectivity uh, to the extent he participates. Too much involvement will render the data of questionable value of social sciences. Another category called the non-participant observation. When the researcher observes as detached emissary without any attempt on his or her part to experience through involvement what others feels. The observation of this type is often termed as non-participant observation. As you know, a researcher becomes a passive observer, but with an active mind. He or she is not supposed to use instrument of precision like it makes unscientific to the non-participant observation. Non-participant observation, as you know, used often in exploratory research. Another category called covert observation. Covert participation is likely to raise problems of latent identity of researchers, and therefore preferred where practically and ethically possible. Another category called overt observation. Participation of observation carried out with the agreement of the subject being studied. Then it will call overt observation. Another category called disguised observation. When the researcher is observing in such a manner that his or her presence may be unknown to the people whom he is observing. Such an observation is described as disguised observation. Sometimes we talk of controlled and uncontrolled observation also. There are some problems, which confront a observer when he or she goes to field. Talking about some unscientific attitude. One is Hawthorn Effect. It refers to the behavior modifying effect when a respondent acts like unnatural rather than natural, or like behaves artificially, then the effect is called Hawthorn Effect. Elevation effect. When a researcher has a tendency to use a particular part of scale in recording an interaction, the preference of a particular type of scale, a particular type of behavior, this is known as elevation effect. The third is Hola effect. When a researcher allows his or her judgment to influence his or her observation, for example, when a white race is considered to be most intelligent, most sociable, then it is called Hola effect. An observation is a very important technique, but an observer must aware about concept of reactivity. There is two types of reactivity. The first is personal. It is considered with the impact of behavioral effect or impact of behavior of researcher on observed action. A good training of researcher comes into the picture when you state participant observation. You have to minimize the effect of your personality by entering into the group. The researcher's latent identity should be hidden for that matter, right? And second is procedural. It is the effect that the whole structure of research must have a subject response. In order to get rid of demerits of non-participant or participant observation, Goodham had suggested quasi-participant observation. A researcher has to strike a balance between his or her involvement and detachment uh, from his field. Participation facilitates observation, right? A observer must have empathy. An observer uses techniques such as interview, personal letters, diaries, other files, and video recording for the deep understanding of society. These days, technology becomes very important thing. When you go to the field, you have recorder, you have video recording, so you can later also observe the same phenomena with a different perspective or different mindset. So the research becomes more reliable in these days, right? While doing observation in the field, a researcher has to focus two things: whether the situation is to be a natural one or contrived one, whether those observed are to be aware or unaware about your presence, right? Social scientist develops a new way of observation is called systematic observation. It limits your prejudices and biases, making the respondents feel the situation as natural, but far more through the application of controls on the observer in the form of mechanical synchronizing devices, team observation, focus group, film recording. These are important instrument when you use observation method. Sometimes people may not have the time. Yeah, often sometimes people may not have this time, or they may not be interested to be interviewed. They may resent being single out or asked questions whose purpose is observed to them. They may object your study. So these are the problems which confront often to the researcher when he or she goes to the field. Narrative recording and using skills in observation are important things, but the observation itself may be defective or illusory or ideologically wrong. If you use your judgment often in your research, you can use a precision or pre-established thought. It depends upon the category of observation that you are using. One of the greatest source of unreliability is the constant error introduced by observer because of distorted of his perception by his or own need and values. The observer is always a variable to be taken into account. Observation method has various limitations. Firstly, it is an expensive method. Secondly, the information provided by the method is very limited. So I'm going to quote a thinker called Brand Russell, who said the kernel of the scientific outlook is the refusal to regard our own desire, taste, and interests as affording a key to the understanding of the world. Lastly, I am going to conclude like an observer must check his or her physiological, and psychological effects on his observation and will explore the unknown fact more scientifically. Thank you so much.